So the first topic today is around the risks and benefits of DevOps. So oftentimes, I think for most folks, we really have to sell DevOps to the organization, and the ownership and who carries the purse for investing in a DevOps team could vary and has changed over the years with the way that technology has changed. One of the biggest gaps today in communicating the upside and downside risks to those business leaders. So the question is, what are some specific benefits and barriers to DevOps through the lens of Salesforce? So I'm going to ask Brian to kick us off with a response.
Yeah, I like what MJ said about it being a journey, and part of the journey is really having the right mindset to get you to where you want to go. And when I talk about DevOps as a technologist, I understand a lot of my stakeholders or sponsors. They don't necessarily care how the sausage gets made, right? They don't care on how we deliver on our initiatives. But I do think that for a DevOps practice to be successful within an organization, it needs to be endorsed and it needs to be sponsored, and some aspects of it need to be enforced in practice, particularly if it requires a monetary investment or investment of resources. And so my prime directive really for me, and this is just things I've learned throughout my career, is that what's self-evident to you as a technologist may not be self-evident to everybody, and it's really important to have a little bit of empathy and a little bit of humility around what you're trying to do and what you're trying to get endorsed, and you really have to couch these conversations in terms that people can understand. It's as much about a paradigm shift in how you think about delivering value to your organization as it is about the tooling or the technology that's behind it. And in fact, I think that's probably the most important aspect of it, right? Because it really is how we're delivering value to the business and how we're mitigating the risk of those changes, not just to the systems that we're supporting, but to the organization as a whole, how we enable our end users into the features that we're rolling out, for example. It's one thing just to deliver something. It's another thing for people to actually know how to use it and use it in the way that it was intended. So there's some basic tenets that we talk about when we talk about DevOps, or even when we talk about just agile. An agile mindset in general, and it's things like we fail fast and fail early. We shift left. We want to focus on automation. There's a faster time to market, but I think every organization is a little bit different. Every organization has different inflection points or different areas that it needs to improve on, or it needs to focus on, or that it wants to solve. And it's really important to take that marketing speak and translate it into language that your particular business or enterprise can really understand and digest, and then have some KPIs around them. So if I think about fail fast and fail early, a really efficient KPI that people want to know what they're going to get out of this. You're going to reduce the amount of defects that reach production by X%, and thereby increase your end user satisfaction or your customer satisfaction, decrease downtime. You really want to start to think about, all right, as I go through this process, I go through this journey incrementally, what are the things that I'm trying to resolve? If I get a faster time to market for my products or for a particular feature, one thing that I always say to stakeholders is, what's the value of code that sits in QA or development to the organization, right? And it's absolutely zero, right? If it's not out there and your customers aren't using it or your end users aren't using it, then it has no value. So that faster time to market has to translate into some mapping to a strategic initiative, strategic outcomes that you're hoping to achieve with that particular release. There's a lot of things that you need to start to examine within your organization and with your enterprise to get down to really those KPIs and how are you going to deliver that value and what those improvements are that you're going to make. And it isn't about the technology and about the tooling. It's about this paradigm shift in how the organization thinks about delivering on its value. That was a mouthful.
That was great. Thank you. Any thoughts from the panelists? We'll open it up to discussion.
I think it's a terrific insight. So, I mean, MJ had talked about something I strongly agree with, that you need to think of DevOps as a journey, not a destination. Brian had pointed out, you know, every org is different. I would say not only is every Salesforce instance different, but certainly every organization, you know, the human organization within any place you'll ever work is going to be totally different. And Brian, in identifying how failing quicker, or, you know, learning from mistakes and reducing downtime produces a faster time to market. These are all wonderful insights, in that we're trying to get you all understanding that there are no perfect answers here. The cliche I would throw in of my own is, you know, this is an art, not a science. So wherever you are, if you're a Salesforce instance of 5 people, if you're a Salesforce instance of 40,000 people, it doesn't matter. Just start putting some kind of a process together if you don't, and get people agreeing on, okay, here's the way that a stakeholder presents a problem. We take that problem, we figure out a solution, we build the solution, and we promote it into our production instance. You got to start figuring out what that discipline is going to be, and that's what will enable you to follow the kind of process Brian was describing.
Yeah, and that discipline is important. And, you know, some companies are public companies, they have compliance, SOX or audit requirements, some very tangible benefits. They're like, auditors love automated processes that have very little human intervention, right? And so that's a very real thing, you know, that to key in on if you're a public company. And, you know, there's the idea of being proactive versus being reactive. You know, part of that, you know, falls into that fail fast and fail early mindset. But, you know, you're really trying to mitigate risk to your systems and identify issues before they occur, right? And that really goes into the monitoring aspect, the operational aspect of DevOps. So you're being proactive and trying to resolve problems before they occur, as opposed to being reactive to something at a quarter close that then takes, you know, a tiger team to resolve over the course of, you know, 5 days and in a weekend. You know, it's so the discipline required in order to get to that, in order to ensure that what you're deploying out has stability and has value, is really, really important. It does. It's part of that paradigm shift that I mentioned.
Yeah, definitely agree with all of that. I think part of what we're saying is that there's no one solution that is going to work for all companies. Even 2 companies that on the surface appear to be very similar to each other may need very different kinds of DevOps solutions in place, but there are some basic tenets that all DevOps solutions should have, and it involves thinking before doing. Yes, wanting to move quickly, but also wanting to move in an organized, orderly manner, so you know what's getting deployed, you know what's getting built before it gets deployed.
I'll give a quick reminder, the Q&A is open. So if anybody has any questions for the panel that they'd like on this topic, or really just in general, feel free to add those. I see a few coming through. Any other thoughts, guys, on benefits and barriers?
You know, I think, you know, one thing, and Salesforce has certainly come a long way over the last few years in, I think it started out with a really good foundation with, you know, sort of a test-driven mindset in unit testing and test automation in and of itself as a development platform. The other aspects of that, from a, you know, code, you know, source code management perspective and integrations to other tooling, is where it's really starting to shine and show the power of the platform overall in how it can really deliver that value to the enterprise. But that the discipline that requires, we'll probably talk a little bit more about it. I don't want to change subjects, but it's really, you know, it is a configuration-based platform. Somebody can go in with the right permissions and just make changes, right? And maybe you want that, right? Maybe you don't want everything to flow through your CI/CD pipeline all right, and be continuously integrated. But maybe you do, maybe you have to have those controls in place. And I think, like MJ said, every organization is going to require a little bit of a different tooling. Not every organization has an engineering team behind it. You've got empowered super users who can make certain changes that represents some challenges in terms of that source code management and the environment management that we talked about. So it's important to have that planning done up front.
Could you guys speak to how Salesforce DevOps and why Salesforce DevOps specifically is necessary, and how we might see organizations that may have a DevOps team for their core product, but maybe lacking that on the Salesforce org side, and why kind of pitch why you need Salesforce DevOps as well, and why it's not enough to maybe just have that team focused on core product.
I liken it to that fail fast and fail early, right? It's an enterprise platform, right? And it's a system of record for your customer data, your opportunity data. If you've got other aspects of Salesforce billing, it could be your billing system of record as well, right? You want to ensure some level of stability, integrity on that platform, particularly as it's not just an enterprise application, it's a development platform, above everything else. And the more you change it, the more you customize it, the more important it is to ensure that the risk to the operational stability of your organization is mitigated. I think that's a key factor, right? You want to be able to test it, make sure it works, and then deploy it, right? Or at least deliver it. And there's a difference, but ensure that you're not going to screw anything up, and your sales team, for example, isn't just going to be twiddling their thumbs while you fix something that shouldn't have been broken in the first place.
That's great.
I think also it's important to know that some customers, their SaaS product is built on Salesforce, either through a community or through a managed package on the App Exchange. And so a lot of times they need to bring in the type of DevOps operations to make sure that it's stable enough for their customers when they do production releases.
That's great. Great. Well, thank you, guys. Let's move on to topic number 2. And thank you all for submitting your questions. I'm starting to see those roll through, and we'll get to those as we continue the conversation.